Thank you for your attendance today. Hopefully it's going to be an enriching experience for you. And to kick everything off, we have a wonderful educator with us this morning that's going to provide some really great insights to her experience and what she is doing. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Shannon Salter, who is now in her 13th year of teaching in Allentown at the Building 21 High School. She's one of the leading social studies teachers, not only in Pennsylvania, but across the country. She has a passion for creating opportunities for her students to take the skills that they obtain and develop in school, to take it out of the classroom and to make an impact in their particular community. She has been a grantee of the National Science Foundation, has published research in multiple education journals, and has been featured at multiple professional development sessions at such places as the National Geographic Seminar, as well as the National Council for Social Studies Annual Conference. She's a member of the PA Civics Educator Network, the National Geographic Educator Advisory Panel, and the National Constitution Teacher Advisory Council. So she has a lot of balls in the air, but she's doing great work in the field of civics education, not only in Allentown and Pennsylvania, but nationally. So please help me welcome, as our first speaker, Shannon Salter.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm so excited to be there. Thank you so much, Congressman, for kicking us off that way and for that kind introduction. I am just so excited to be here in Pennsylvania, ready to spend this day with each of you. I got a question for you. Who's ready to spend the day today saving democracy? I was worried we might not be caffeinated enough to respond to that line, so I'm glad you're with me. I'm glad you're with me. This might be the first time I've taught a morning class without a cup in my hand, so thanks for being with me on that. So as you've just been told, my name is Shannon Salter, and I'm so proud to prepare students for civic life in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And as a side gig, because don't we all have side gigs? As a side gig, I am an advocate for civic education and civic educators at the local, state, and national level, and I'm just thrilled to be here doing that work with you today. I want to talk about my free teacher summer. You know that free teacher summer we all have, all that free time? This summer I was lucky enough to spend some time touring up and down the East Coast and geeking out at all those history sites we like to stop at. I saw colonial fortresses that predate the existence of our republic. I stopped at some Revolutionary and Civil War battlefields, and I dropped in on the homes of some of our founders. How many of you have ever visited the mountaintop home of Thomas Jefferson? All right. So it's a place of very complex history, right? It's celebratory of one of our nation's greatest founders, most poetic writers of the documents of freedom. But that site is also steeped in some of the most challenging parts of our republic's early history. And honestly, as the type of history geek who likes to go visit historic sites on my vacations and for fun, I'd avoided Monticello for a really long time. I had this sense of dread that I was going to find a history there that resonated in a bad way with me, that seemed false, that seemed too mythological and not honest enough. And I'm so proud of the work that they've been doing at Monticello in recent years, retooling it so that they balance the need to justly celebrate one of the important founders of our nation and his amazing contributions to who we are, with the complex stories that need to be told honestly about what else was happening on that plantation while he was living there. And they're doing a great job with that. But I want to draw your attention to a peculiarity that was pointed out to me on my recent visit. If you exit the mansion and step out onto the North Pavilion and look out over the Virginia wolves, did I say wolves? I meant forest, woods. There's this weird canal almost of trees that have been cleared away or cropped really short. And 5 miles down that canal, you'll see the gleaming white dome of the University of Virginia. The view of this Academy of Learning, which of course Thomas Jefferson himself founded in 1819, has been kept permanently visible from the mansion. And I sat there this summer and I did some reflection. There's this role that the founders handed to all of us here in this room, right? They told us that as educators, we were going to be the guardians of democracy. They needed us to step up. Right? Jefferson's motivations for creating the publicly funded University of Virginia had been first articulated 30 years before that university opened its doors when he proposed Bill 79 to the Virginia General Assembly. And like many in civic life, Jefferson was fond of using 50 words to say what you could say with 5. I gotta warn you, and I'm sure some of us are guilty of that too because it's kind of a social studies person thing. I'm equally guilty. I'm gonna try not to do that with us this morning. But rather than quoting him then, to summarize what he articulated there, he said that even the best forms of government that humanity can devise will, if left to their own devices, degenerate into tyranny. And he believed that the only effective means of protecting this would be, I'm going to quote a little bit, to illuminate as far as practicable the minds of the people at large, and more especially to give them knowledge of those facts which history provides to us. He believed that by knowing the experiences and wisdoms of other ages and other countries, the educated would be able to defeat that descent into abusive government. He believed that the most just laws and the most capable self-government would be the result of citizens who had received what he called a liberal education, worthy to receive and able to guard the sacred deposit of the rights and liberties of their fellow citizens. Perhaps it would be easier if I left it to Jefferson's fellow founder, Ben Franklin, who did have the skill of boiling big ideas down to bumper stickers. Many of you might be familiar with this particular quote, but a nation of well-informed men who've been taught to know and prize the rights which God has given them cannot be enslaved. In other words, the founders said, it's up to us, right? It leaves us with nothing less than the weight of democracy itself on our shoulders, the shoulders of social studies and civics educators, right? We are the forward guard of an ongoing founding of the American Republic. We are charged in each generation with the education of our young to take their place in American civic life. It's a little bit important, this work that we do. But given the fact that you've all taken a day out of your classrooms, you've left your students in the capable hands of subs, if you could find them, and committed to spend this day today in conversation and fellowship with each other, I'm going to imagine that perhaps I'm speaking to the choir here. So I'm going to presume your agreement that we've all come here today, and I'm going to invoke Abe Lincoln now, to dedicate ourselves to that unfinished work, that our government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. So let's turn our attention to the state of that work here in Pennsylvania. Right. Before we can talk about whether we're doing a good job, let's talk for a minute about what that good job looks like. Right? You can look at any number of sources about what are the best practices in civic education, and what you will find, and the Congressman mentioned them in his address as well, are these 3 pillars, right? In order to prepare students for empowered and intentional engagement in civic life, we need to provide them with civic knowledge, civic skills, and civic disposition. Right? Civic knowledge includes things like the structure and processes and the institutions of government. We can add to this knowledge of the related social studies disciplines of history, economics, geography, and more. Right? Civic skills are those skills that are needed to participate as active and empowered members of a democracy. And at a minimum, these include things like critical thinking skills, media literacy, and skill at civic dialogue. Right? And finally, civic dispositions or actions, right? Are our students emerging from their time with us with a willingness and intention to participate in the activities of civic life? These may include things like voting, volunteerism, participation in community meetings, communication with elected officials, and public service, including even maybe government service, right? So who are the people out there saying that these elements are the essential components of civic preparation? Well, it isn't just me. While you'll find those 3 pillars in any number of sources, today, this morning with you, I'm going to rely upon as authority the wide-ranging 2011 Carnegie Foundation report called Guardians of Democracy, the Civic Mission of Schools. This report, which offers guidance as to the proven practices that will lead to the most important outcomes of effective civic education, as well as proposals for policy at local, statewide, and national levels in order to achieve those outcomes, rests upon those 3 pillars as the self-evident truth of civic education. And these are the folks who wrote that report, right? So we've got the Annenberg Center for Public Policy right up the road here at UPenn, the National Conference on Citizenship, which was chartered by Congress every year since 1946 to conduct the nation's largest measure of our civic engagement, Circle at Tufts University, the American Bar Association, and the Campaign for the Civic Mission of Schools, which was chaired by the late Supreme Court Justice and founder of iCivic, Sandra Day O'Connor, as well as Congressman Lee Hamilton, who served the people of Indiana in Congress for over 30 years, and then went on to found the Center on Congress at Indiana University. Okay? So these folks agree, those 3 pillars are what we have to keep our eye on, right? And the report's comprehensive look at the past, present, and future of civic education put it in one place for us what I think most of us would agree are the fundamental needs and proven practices of our craft. But it isn't just these national organizations and advocates who tell us that those 3 pillars are essential. Pennsylvania agrees. This is from the PDE SAS Act 35 toolkit. We're going to talk more about Act 35 in a minute, right? But look at it, same 3 pillars, right? So if Pennsylvania agrees with what all of those national advocates for civic education tell us we should be doing to achieve the most successful civic outcomes, then Pennsylvania must be at the leading edge of delivering really effective civic education to our students, right? So we can all relax today and just share with one another how great and successful we're being at this work because we don't have anything to do, right? Or maybe not. Because it will come as no surprise to the people in this room when I say Pennsylvania hasn't created support and accountability in civic education, right? While Pennsylvania state standards are skills-based along the line of the National Council for Social Studies C3 framework, there's no mechanism for holding schools accountable for helping students achieve these standards. There's no keystone exam to incentivize schools to invest in social studies instruction and the professional development of their social studies teachers. Student performance in social studies in no way, shape, or form informs either the school's published school report card or those students' prospects for graduation, right? The fact of the matter is that the 3 C's in the C3 framework are college, career, and civic readiness. But in Pennsylvania, as with too many other states, that last C is often silent, right? What we do have is Act 35. If you've never read it, you can find it on the PDE SAS website. It won't take you very long. It's not even 2 full sides of one piece of paper, which is a pretty short piece of legislation for something upon which democracy itself rests, right? We're going to talk about it more in a session later on today. But for now, all you need to know, if you haven't seen it before, is that Act 35 requires Pennsylvania schools sometime between 7th and 12th grade to administer an assessment of civic knowledge of their own making. There are no specific requirements for the assessment, and PDE can't ask you to show them your assessment. Okay. Success or failure on this assessment doesn't impact a student's progress towards graduation. The only requirement is that schools self-report the number of students who took it and the number of students who passed it and the number of students who got 100%. Schools set their own passing rate. For schools who don't have their own locally invented assessment, Act 35 suggests the US citizenship test with its passing rate of 60%, right? And then schools' passing rates are published on a page deep within the PDE SAS website. Is this the best we can do? The Guardian of Democracy report provided a roadmap to proven practices in civic education, as well as policies needed to bring these practices to life. You'll notice that many of these practices exist already in our individual classrooms and schools. They aren't a new invention of a group of academics trying to renovate and bring something new into the marketplace, right? They're a precise articulation of the best of our craft and a roadmap to ensure that all of us are supported in delivering them. And here they are. Notice the combination of knowledge, skills, and actions. In Pennsylvania, while guidance from PDE agrees with the importance of all 3 components of civic preparation, what little accountability we do have focuses only on that first pillar of knowledge. Are you giving them a test? Did they pass the half a credit government class? Right? The Guardian report includes policy recommendations which we have seen in the years since its publication adopted in many other states. For local schools, the report urges a shift away from rote learning of facts to an emphasis on how citizens can and must participate in civic life. There is a strong recommendation for a shift to civics across the curriculum. I often say that civics is the bridge by which all learning can exit the building and make an impact on the world. Right? We social studies teachers have all accepted our role in the development of students' reading and writing fluency and many literacy across the curriculum initiatives. We've all done this, right? You're all literacy teachers? And I'm not disagreeing with that. We are all literacy teachers. But here's the thing. We haven't seen civic literacy practices encouraged in the science classroom down the hall, the math classroom upstairs. I can tell you from personal experience that a science classroom is actually a great incubator for civic action. I've enjoyed leveraging our district's really big STEM budget to get into science classrooms, but then help students demonstrate that a knowledge of civics empowers them to literally change the face of the city of Allentown with their scientific learning, planting trees, creating pollinator gardens, repurposing disused and abandoned spaces into new recreation spaces, right? All of these celebrated achievements that started with science learning couldn't have happened if our students didn't have a knowledge of stakeholders and processes of community decision-making, the skill of engaging in public conversations about community needs and resources, and the disposition to use their learning to impact their neighborhoods. So these are things that we can adopt at the local level. For statewide policymakers, the report asks for state-led standards and assessments that hold schools accountable for student civic learning, as well as alternate-to-test forms of assessment, which are going to be much better suited at measuring skills and disciplines. No one's looking for a fourth Keystone exam. Please don't leave today thinking, wow, that crazy Salter lady got up and said, why don't we have a Keystone in social studies? Not looking for one, right? But with no accountability for civic learning, there's no investment in civic learning. Right? According to Circle at Tufts University, each year the federal government spends $50 per student on STEM education. It spends 5 cents on civic education. I would imagine that each of us have experiences of our own that suggest that this funding disparity exists at the state and local level as well, which is why I like to borrow money from the science teachers in the STEM classrooms. Speaking of investment, the Guardian report urges states to invest in high-quality civics professional development for teachers. And from the federal policymakers, the report asks for funding for innovation in civic learning. It asks for state-level data on civics learning outcomes to be made available. We've all heard every time a new NAEP report comes out and says students don't know the 3 branches of government, students don't know their civic learning. Those results are never disaggregated for us to let us know what state's doing what and how we're doing, so we can't even compare best practices to civic learning outcomes. I'm here today in part because of action in this federal policy area as a result of this report, the Educating for American Democracy report, and then the EAD roadmap and pedagogy companion, and now implementation task forces such as my own teacher leadership task force were all made possible because of federal funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities to answer this call for innovation in civic ed. Now, it isn't just the federal government that read and acted on that report. Since that report was published, 14 states have civic literacy tests. 39 states require a civics course to graduate. Pennsylvania is, of course, included in that number. 5 states require service learning, and 24 states at least offer credit for it. Pennsylvania also does that within the confines of our Act 158 system, our Keystone law, where civic learning can be used as an alternative piece of evidence to replace an unsuccessful Keystone exam. 8 states give credit for civic participation, and PA Act 158 does provide us with some avenues to do that as well. But what's really exciting, 7 states have created Civic SEALs program, awards for demonstration of civic readiness that require proof of all 3 pillars, proof of knowledge, proof of skills, and proof of actions in order for students and school districts to be recognized, right? Much like PA's Act 58, they offer an alternative to assessment-only methods of proving civic presentation by students creating a portfolio showing that they're ready to enter the world of adult civic life. Okay? And Pennsylvania has smatterings of things that could be leveraged to do this. For example, not out of the Department of Education, but out of the Secretary of State's office, we have the Governor's Civic Engagement Award, which recognizes students and schools for the acts of registering to vote and volunteering and being trained to serve as poll workers in their communities. So what makes programs like this a reality? Maybe this is where you all come in, okay? Education policy has long been the purview of legislators, bureaucrats, textbook and test publishers, and other non-teacher stakeholders. When it comes to participating in civic discourse, even when it comes to education, civic educators are often encouraged to enact that old, terrible saying, those who can't do, teach. I'm asking you today, as you charge your batteries with us today, sharing the work that we do in our classroom, consider the possibility that civic educators can be civic actors. No one looks at the gym teacher in your building and assumes that when they go home they don't work out and then they don't come back and talk to their kids about it. No one looks at the home ec teacher and says, well, obviously you don't cook when you go home. English teachers always come back into the building and talk to kids about the books they're reading, a poem they were excited by yesterday. Our art teacher takes students on walking tours of downtown Allentown and shows them installations of his own personal and private artwork. But civic teachers maintain as a badge of professionalism a code of silence around our own civic life. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should go back to school on Monday and tell the kids who you're voting for and what partisan political platform is your famous, but not all civic action is partisan. And modeling for our students the way that we, too, can raise our voice, advocate for the good of our communities, our profession, and democracy itself, consider what that could bring to our teaching. Our host today, PA Civics, part of the Committee of 70, was formed in 2019 to build a coalition to promote civic education and civic engagement in Pennsylvania. That coalition could use more teacher voices. 3 nights ago, I sat in this very building out in the big empty space there in front of the great First Amendment wall, watching the NCC award historian Ken Burns the Liberty Medal. As he accepted, he urged everyone in the audience to not sit back and assume that democracy can take care of itself. Thomas Jefferson obviously agreed, and he built education into the foundation of our democracy to ensure that democracy would be well tended by those who were ready, willing, and able to act with our assistance. So I'm leaving you today with that thought and this question. As PA Civics moves deeper into the work of assessing and supporting improvement in civic learning in our Commonwealth, are we civic educators ready to become civic actors? Thanks so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy your day.